On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, what we learned from Sam Presti's exit interview, including about Josh Giddey, SGA, Gordon Hayward, and the future of this Thunder team.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for InsideTheThunder.com, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by Game Time, we're diving into the OKC Thunder holding their annual exit interview with Sam Presti. What will the Thunder do with Josh Giddey? What happened with Gordon Hayward as there's more controversy stirred up over this blip of a move at the trade deadline? And some interesting looks at the offseason, including SGA's future in OKC. But Tuesday was Sam Presti's annual end-of-season press conference, which lasted 2.5 hours. It was over 40 pages long. The transcript was. This took forever because Sam Presti hit on a billion topics, and he took every single question and was as transparent as you possibly can be at this stage. Obviously, you're not going to go up there and reveal all of your company secrets, but for what he could, talk about and what he could reveal, he did a lot in this time. So much so that your head's still spinning a little bit with all the information thrown at you. I think that this is a really cool thing and something that allows everyone to be better, right? That you can be better, hearing right from the general manager, which does not happen in every NBA market, especially not to the degree of a 2.5 hour press conference with the top decision maker of these teams, as Sam Presti is. But one of the biggest talking points this summer, and for this press conference, is going to be and was the Thunder's future plans this summer and what the future looks like for OKC. You go and win 57 games this year, the youngest number one seed of all time. What happens next? And I think that people look at this offseason and they're just curious. What are the moves? What's the aggression level? Who are the targets? Whatever you thought on Monday, I think that you still think today after Sam Presti talked on Tuesday. So on Monday, if you thought that they would just run this thing back and be a relatively unchanged roster, looking to build on that success, there were many, many, many quotes for you to pull from and say, see, that's exactly what they're going to do. If you thought this team was going to go on Monday and make these sweeping moves to really bolster their rotation and bolster their roster, there were opportunities in this press conference for you to say, well, this quote here supports that argument. And I think that he talked about aggressiveness, and it was a really interesting, peek behind the curtain of the Thunder are always aggressive. They're always evaluating players and evaluating what options are out there. It's why that they call around on all these guys that become available and maybe nothing materializes, because it's so important to remember it takes two to tango. Like, you cannot just force these 29 other teams to give you their premier talent. Maybe the guys who you think best fit on this Thunder roster aren't actually available, or the asking price is so steep and so ridiculous that even though you have a massive treasure chest of assets, that cannot let you go make bad moves, right? Just because you have the money to blow doesn't mean you should go spend it recklessly. That's how you go broke, is whenever you do that. So those things matter, of who's truly available, what truly is the asking price. And that there's many things that, had it been public, right, of what they were trying to do behind the scenes that did not quite come true, you would no longer be questioning what the Thunder's aggressive level is with building this roster. And some of that stuff just never comes out and you never see it. So from the outside looking in, right, with only the information that you have presented to you, it makes you wonder what's going on why don't they just simply go do this? Well, it's not as simple as it may sound. For example, even with a free agent, you can't just force a free agent to sign an OKC. You are still going to fight an uphill battle with location, with market, with everything about getting a free agent, to come to Oklahoma City. So I believe the Thunder will do their due diligence on everything. I believe that, as non-hot take-ish as it is, no one knows the true answer of what they're going to do until August 1st. Once the dust settles on the offseason, then you'll know, what transpired. But until then, Sam Presti has left himself open and has left this path open to do a multitude of things. And you can check that off as number one. The first and foremost thing is, unlike some of these other teams, you have the capability of doing multiple things, right? There's other NBA teams that you can look at and say, well, they have no shot of adding talent because they don't have draft picks, they don't have cap space. The Thunder have both those things. They have cap space, they have draft picks, they have sweeteners and deals that we talk about all the time of like what can get a deal over the hump. They have guys that can get deals over the hump. They have the luxury of roster spots. Like they have all the necessary tools to go make a move. But they also have such a young core that's still growing together, still finding their identity, still looking to take the next leap in their individual games, that a lot of their improvement can come internally. And you can make it the strong case that the Thunder aren't quite there to burn the boats. As Sam Presti said, burn the boats is a fantastic philosophy with the art of war. It's great. I don't think that the Thunder are there yet of burning the boats and not looking back. This was still their first postseason appearance. This was still their first playoff appearance. After the play-in last year, they go have a series this year. Like it seems like everything is so accelerated in this society and in the way that the NBA works, but you are still looking down the barrel of at minimum a half decade of postseason opportunities, right? And I think that one way that gets spun is that like, well, what if blank happens? And it's just the most unrealistic thing. Like it's just the most uncontrollable thing, I should say. For example, what if your MVP candidate gets hurt, as John Morant got hurt this year from Memphis? Like the reason Memphis is bad is not because that magically their core forgot how to play basketball. They were decimated by injuries and they lost their head of the snake guy. Yeah, if Shai does not play the majority of the games next year, the Thunder are not going to be good. And that would be the case no matter what they do in the trade market. Because you're not going to get a guy who equates and offsets losing Shai. So all cards on the table, so long as Shai is healthy and this core is healthy with J-Dub and Chet and as much health as you can have in a season. They got extremely lucky for health this season. That might not be the case next year, but as long as they are fortunate in the injury department, the Thunder are going to be incredibly good for the next 5 years minimum. So after your first playoff run is not the time to go and do something crazy. However, they also have such an opportunity on the table here to go and improve their roster with these resources. But I don't think that was wiped off the table either. So I think that Sam Presti did a really good job of illustrating that both options are good ones. Because what they're not going to do, and I feel confident what they're not going to do is, they're not going to go make a move for the sake of making a move, or for the sake of proving that they're aggressive, or for the sake of proving that they want to improve this roster. The move has to be logically sound, both thought process-wise, implementing on a court-wise, and the assets that it takes. They are not going to be forced into forking over $1 billion assets for a player that it doesn't make sense to do that for. And we'll see what happens. So this is all relatively out of the Thunder's control a little bit as far as this season goes, because they're not that desperate. So the right player with the right contract and the right market price asked for him has to become available to them. That's 3 check marks you've really got to hit for them to go make a massive move. And those things could happen. but it's not a guarantee. I do think that by the end of the summer, you will think that this roster's improved. What's the scale on that, though? What's the sliding scale of improvement? Is it something that's massive as a Woj bomb at 1 a.m. that keeps you awake the rest of the night? Or is it tying up the rotation? But I think that somewhere in there, you'll be happy with the result of the Thunder offseason. Coming up, let's talk Josh Giddey, let's talk SGA, let's talk Gordon Hayward, and more, all from Sam Presti's exit interview. But first, what's here right now, but your friends over at Game Time. Folks, Game Time is fantastic. It's a ticketing app that I think is the very best. So Game Time makes NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on Game Time app actually go down closer to tip-off. And so with these killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest prices guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. I think it's a phenomenal and the premier NBA option for you buying NBA tickets, because of the fact that as these prices go down closer to tip-off, you can delay your decision of if you want to go to these games or not based upon the injury report and who's playing. And this is especially critical in the regular season, but it does not stop at the NBA. Game Time also has everything you can ask for, from theater tickets to MLB, NFL, college sporting events. Like they have tickets for everything that you need a ticket for at Game Time, with a view from your seat and the all-in prices. I love that there's no hidden fees. They just give you the price up front so you know what to expect as you hit the checkout button, and you don't get hit with a random price afterward. Check it out today at Game Time. Go create your account, download the Game Time app, and use code LOCKEDINNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, use code LOCKEDINNBA, LOCKEDONNBA, for $20 off your first purchase by downloading the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. Sam Presti had a lot to say at his exit interview. We'll continue on talking about that with Josh Giddey. So, Josh Giddey, he was very complimentary of Josh Giddey and seems still very confident in the player that Josh Giddey can turn into. Both parties, Sam Presti and Josh himself, were very open about, this season was filled with ups and downs. It didn't necessarily go the way that you anticipated or you thought it could go. It was a season full and bookended by bad spells, right? There was that stretch in the middle. We're from March 1st through that New Orleans series, really. Josh played really, really good basketball. But you started the season slow, you ended the season slower, and you got benched in Dallas to snap a 218-game starting streak. And then you were left at a kind of a fork in the road, at a crossroad of where are they going to go from here? And once again, I think that Sam Presti left the door open for either option, right? If I had to place money down right now, the smart money would be that Josh Giddey is just on the opening night roster, because of how many moving parts it would take for that not to be the case. However, he also, still allowed for your mind to wander. So let's just get into what he said. So he is really hammering at the beginning, Josh is 21. 21-year-olds have ups and downs. No one person has the same path as the other. And so that he loves Josh Giddey's toughness and his clutch ability and the stuff that Josh Giddey's really good at. He also mentioned, how they've seen players before go through these ups and downs, and he compared it to Lou Dort, who made the biggest change of his career this year of becoming more efficient and becoming a better player overall at age 25. And that was in large part from understanding how to use him, both Lou Dort internally, as he's talked about, understanding what a good versus bad shot is, and the Thunder understanding how to use him more in a role that's more efficient. So the Thunder have to do a good job with finding a role for Josh Giddey should he be back on this team. And so the Josh Giddey conversation is a multi-layered one. I think that it was also really interesting to point out from Sam that through all of this, Josh Giddey never went and asked the team for more touches or a different role or anything. And I think that stood out the most to me of like just embodying who Josh Giddey is as a player. Because if anyone in the world had the right to go into Sam's office or go into Mark's office and demand a new role or demand more touches, it was Josh Giddey. If anybody had a right to go into their exit interview and just berate the franchise, it was Josh Giddey, not Gordon Hayward, right? Because Josh Giddey, when he was drafted in 2021, things look totally different. And now he's played 3 seasons with 3 straight unbelievably different, roles and expectations, both team expectations and individual expectations. And each season, you've gotten further and further and further away from a role that suits Josh Giddey, which is not Josh Giddey's individual fault, right? You can get mad at Josh Giddey for not shooting threes in the corner. You can get mad at Josh Giddey for not being a high-level defender. He was never supposed to be those things. Like when you were dreaming up the ideal outcome for Josh Giddey on draft night 2021, it was this huge playmaker with the ball in his hands, setting the table and really orchestrating offenses. It was never his catch and shoot ability. It was never his defensive ability. It was never his ability to play off the ball. And as his career has progressed, you've gotten further and further and further away from his identity and what he was initially and what he is still really good at and will thrive in the Olympics here in the next month or so. So, like, that all matters. That in and of itself, that he took that head on, didn't complain about it, and is still trying to work that out. That should all contextualize a 21-year-old struggle. And I think that, again, overall, the sentiment of Sam Presti's Josh Giddey answers, whenever he was asked about Josh Giddey repeatedly, was a very confident, was a very, appreciative, if you will, layout and evaluation of Josh Giddey. And it goes back to the first segment. If he's on the opening night roster, you will point to 5 different quotes from Sam Presti's exit interview that would lead you to that result. But by the same token, whenever he was asked about a contract extension, Sam Presti mentioned that they have another year, that they're going to have those discussions at the appropriate time, but that nothing has to be done right now because they have another year to go. Well, the one thing that we always repeat and we always seem to have figured out about Sam Presti is that he doesn't let his players hit restricted free agency. Well, guess what happens if you don't sign Josh Giddey this summer? He will hit restricted free agency. That is a massive talking point. A recent example of this, although these are 2 different players and 2 different styles and in 2 different aspects of their career. Josh Giddey much better than Darius Bazley, but it's Darius Bazley. Like the entire way his final season in Oklahoma City, you were almost counting down the days of the trade line because you knew that like Sam Presti does not keep around upcoming restricted free agents. So if they really don't get a deal done this summer, then that makes you wonder. That makes you raise an eyebrow. But again, this is a very different circumstance than what we've seen before. And there's always an ability to adapt and to change and to tweak philosophies depending on a case-by-case basis. But that's a clear point of like, if they do make a move this summer, which at this point would be a bit, surprising, not like shocking, not like floored, but it would be, okay, they really did that. If they were to make a move this summer, then we'd be pointing to that quote of like, see, well, whenever he said that they weren't going to extend him, then like, we should have known, right? So like the basis of this entire exit interview was that no matter what happens this summer, you're going to point to something in the exit interview and say, we should have known. Because Sam Presti did a really good job of leaving everything open. Now, I want to talk about Sam Presti giving us a peek into SGA's future and kind of what he believes. I think that Sam Presti, we give him all this credit for being very calculated, very intentional, and not very speculative, speaking in facts. And for him to talk about SGA, whenever he was asked about the ability to sign him to a Supermax extension and assign him to an extension that would make him the first ever $80 million a year player, right? He talked about how awesome that'll be, and that they're going to put themselves in position to make that deal for him without sacrificing the other players on the team, and like that. The contract stuff was all good. That was all gravy. What stuck out the most was this quote from Sam Presti when talking about SGA. I think he's really proud of what he's built here. You're always going to sleep better at a house you built. A big part of his ascent was born with handing him the ball without any promises. I think he's proud of it. I don't think he has anyone in his ear telling him not to be proud of it. That's what Sam Presti said about SGA. And I just get this sentiment from Sam, and when SGA himself speaks from SGA, that like this is a really good marriage. And that SGA is secure and confident and wants to see this thing through. It goes back to what we've said in this podcast before, whenever all that trade noise got loud about Shai and about his future. There's only 30 opportunities to be the face of the franchise. And somebody's got to be the face of Charlotte. Somebody's got to be the face of New Orleans. Somebody's going to be the face of actual title contenders. And to be handed the keys to being a face of one of 30 franchises is special, no matter if it is Charlotte or if it is wherever. The Kings or whoever. Detroit. But it's especially special if you're handed the keys as a face of the franchise of a team that can win a championship. And from here on out, this Thunder team is a franchise that can win a championship. And to be a player who's seen the franchise through these evolutions and has led the way the entire time, it makes that, next step so much more gratifying. And I think that Shai, the second that the clock strikes midnight on the new league year next offseason, is going to sign that Supermax extension, because no matter what, like even if a player hates it in their environment, if you get offered the Supermax, you're going to sign it and then worry about that stuff later. That's why we've seen the increase of trade demands and trades versus leaving free agency. But I really do believe, like, as of this moment, May 29th in the year of our Lord 2024, I do believe that the intent behind signing that Supermax extension for both sides, for the Thunder and for SGA, will be to play out the length of that contract in OKC. And now, 5 years is a very long time. It's especially long in the NBA. And especially when you tack on the 2 years that they'll still be left on his current contract before you get to those years in advance. That's a really long time. But that would be the plan. And I think that they're going to get that done. I think that you have to take what Sam said. If we're going to give Sam his entire career this mystique about him that he just only talks about what's true and is calculated and everything else, that was very poignant. Coming up, what do you say about Gordon Hayward? What happens next with OKC? All coming up. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. Folks, let's talk about Gordon Hayward. Oh, my goodness. Never in my life did I think we'd still be talking about Gordon Hayward on this day, but Sam Presti was very open about the Gordon Hayward trade, and I don't think that you ever really hear an executive talk this way, of just flat out saying, quote, I missed on that. That's on me, but I'm learning, trying to learn this team, just trying to be a great observer of this team as it's going through its paces. I don't think I read that one perfect. That's what Sam Presti said about the Gordon Hayward trade. And then Gordon Hayward's wife goes on Instagram and dishes about how Gordon Hayward told Sam Presti it wouldn't work, but the Thunder still made the move. This is just a mess. And if Gordon Hayward would have just had a bland answer at his exit interview, nobody would have cared. Nobody would have even truly badgered Sam Presti about Gordon Hayward. They would have asked about the trade deadline in general, and then Sam would have been able to answer it in general. But who cares anymore? The Thunder did make a mistake trading for Gordon Hayward in the sense of he was not the player that he was billed as. He didn't get back from injury. He didn't get integrated into this team. But I think that's some interesting like excuses to use, so to say, because I do think that Gordon Hayward understood the team's concept and was able to play that special defensive style very well with OKC. He was able to rebound very well. He did everything very well except for shoot the basketball. He did not shoot. And that's the bottom line. He understood the team concepts. He understood his positioning on the floor defensively and offensively. He had many open chances that he passed up. Whether that's injury related or what, I don't think that it was the cause of just throwing a guy onto a moving train, as they repeatedly say. But let this be the last day we ever talk about Gordon Hayward in respect to the trade deadline acquisition. Because as Sam pointed out, too, that was a multi-layer thing of you free up roster spots, you free up salary cap space, you free up a lot of stuff with that move. Another thing I want to point out before we get out of here of like, we lean on Sam Presti's being calculated and everything else. He was very bullish about Chet Holmgren and J-Dub, and both of them having star power, both of them having what it takes to be at that upper echelon of player. And this is a guy who's been around many elite players in his tenure, and a guy who, in a way, your job is to, temper expectations, I guess. But it's full speed ahead on Chet Holmgren and J-Dub. He said that J-Dub is coming, and he's a no numbers guy who OKC wants to continue to be him. And then for Chet, he's a no agenda player who whenever he's on the floor, it's winning time. And I think that was really interesting. Like, obviously, Chet has all these hopes and aspirations, and every player wants to be the very best version of themselves. They want to push their game further. They want to unlock these new avenues of their game. But when it's on the court, when the ball's tipped and there you are, you're running for your life, you're a shining star, how are you going to help the team win? When's the time and place to try to expand your game versus make winning plays? And I think that Chet has that balance, down to a science. And he'll be in the gym this summer with Kevin Durant and all these other NBA superstars, and he'll take from them, he'll learn from them, he'll grow his game. And I'm excited to see Chet Holmgren play next year. I mean, you see what J-Dub did from year 1 to 2 on the court. What can Chet do from year 1 to 2 on the court? It's exciting. It's exciting. Sam Presti also discussed the team identity and rebounding. He mentioned that the Thunder are not set in any way, and that the way that they think is open-minded, and they're not trying to prove anyone wrong with this style of play or whatever. But I think that he did have a really good analogy of, if the Thunder were awful, like just dreadful at forcing turnovers, but we're a top 5 defense as they are right now, nobody would care. Like, they just say, "Oh, that's great, you're a top 5 defense," because they're awful at rebounding, which they did get better in the second half of the season at rebounding. Because they're not good at rebounding, it is like the worst thing in the world. When in reality, it's the same end result. You're still getting the same amount of stops. Your stops are coming differently. The way you end possessions is different. You're ending possessions with turnovers and not rebounds, but you're still ending possessions to the tune of a top 5 defense. And that's what it comes down to. It does not matter what formula you use as long as you get to the same answer. And the answer you want is a top 5 defense. He also mentioned that, you don't want to turn one problem into 3. So, when you look at the NBA, you're never going to craft a very perfect team that has zero flaws. So far, this team has one massive one, which is like the rebounding. You don't want to turn that one massive one into 3 or 4 smaller ones, like 3 or 4 problems that now you're chasing your tail. You're chasing your tail because you're never going to make a perfect roster. And then I think that he took the opportunity whenever asked about the Boston Globe letter that resurfaced where he was campaigning for the Celtics to draft Jason Kidd to dunk on Twitter users. And he said that Twitter users, are frequently wrong, but never in doubt, and they have 100% of the confidence in their opinion with 10% of the information, and that he was a Twitter user back in 1993. Yeah, I mean, again, I think that, fans can only go off of what's made public, and you gotta have to take that, right? You gotta take that, like, what fans say and like what fans tweet and what people say on Twitter, they're only privy to what they're privy to. So it's by the same token, not necessarily their fault for not knowing because it's just not out there, it's not public. But you also, again, the confidence thing and the way it's discussed can come from a place of very disingenuous habits and nature. But that's what Sam Presti had to say for the most part on his exit interview. We'll talk more on tomorrow's show. And what are your takeaways? Did you listen to Sam Presti's presser? Did you consume it on Twitter? What were your takeaways from this presser? Drop them down below on YouTube. Subscribe, like on YouTube. Subscribe anywhere you should podcast from. It's totally free. We're here for you every single day talking Thunder basketball. Until next time, be good and be good to one another.